The sound of rotor blades cutting through the desert air had become as familiar to Sofia Chun as her own heartbeat. But today, something in that rhythmic thrum made her pause mid-wrench turn, her oil-stained fingers gripping the Apache's transmission, housing as she listened with the intensity of someone reading Morse code. 28 years old and already a decade deep in helicopter maintenance, Sofia had learned to hear things that others missed, the subtle changes in pitch that whispered of impending failure, the microscopic vibrations that spoke of components crying out for attention. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Fort Bliss stretched endlessly around her, its hangars and flight lines shimmering in the Texas heat like a mirage of military precision. The 1st Armored Division's Aviation Brigade was preparing for their most critical deployment yet, a counter-terrorism operation in the mountains of Afghanistan where Apache attack helicopters would provide close air support for ground troops. In terrain so hostile that mechanical failure meant certain death. Every aircraft had to be perfect, every system triple-checked, every component functioning at peak performance. Lives depended on it. Sofia wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a streak of hydraulic fluid that she didn't bother to clean. Her work uniform bore the evidence of countless hours spent inside the mechanical hearts of these war machines, each stain a testament to problems solved and disasters prevented. She'd chosen helicopter maintenance over the college scholarship her parents had desperately wanted her to accept, drawn by something deeper than career prospects or family expectations. These aircraft called to her in ways that textbooks never could. The morning briefing room buzzed with the controlled energy of experienced combat pilots preparing for deployment. Major Harrison's voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived 3 tours in hostile territory, each mission adding another layer of confidence to his already formidable presence. His weathered hands moved across the tactical maps with practiced precision as he outlined their upcoming mission parameters. Sofia lingered at the back of the room, a shadow among shadows, her presence acknowledged only by the occasional nod from pilots who knew her work kept them alive but never bothered to learn her name. She'd attended these briefings for years, absorbing every detail about flight operations, weather patterns, and tactical requirements. Her mechanical expertise extended far beyond simple maintenance. She understood how each component performed under combat stress, how environmental factors affected system reliability, how pilot techniques could either preserve or destroy delicate mechanisms. "Gentlemen," Major Harrison announced, his voice cutting through the ambient chatter, "we're looking at a 96-hour deployment window in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Weather reports indicate severe turbulence, high-altitude operations, and temperature variations that will test every system on these birds. Our mission is providing close air support for special operations teams, conducting high-value target elimination." Captain Rodriguez raised his hand, his expression reflecting the cocky confidence that seemed standard issue among attack helicopter pilots. "Sir, what's our maintenance support looking like once we're in theater? These Apaches are solid, but mountain operations can be brutal on mechanical systems." Major Harrison gestured toward the back of the room where Sofia stood quietly observing. "Our maintenance crew will be minimal, essentially Chun back there, and maybe 1 assistant if we're lucky. Command considers this a short-duration mission, with limited mechanical requirements." Lieutenant Thompson, barely 25 and fresh from advanced flight training, chuckled softly. "No offense to Chun, but 1 mechanic for an entire squadron seems optimistic. What happens if we have major system failures?" The comment earned scattered laughter from the assembled pilots, the kind of dismissive humor that Sofia had endured throughout her military career. These men saw her as a tool rather than a professional, useful for routine maintenance, but hardly someone whose opinion mattered when discussing complex operational challenges. They failed to recognize that her decade of experience had taught her things about Apache helicopters that their flight manuals couldn't capture. Sofia remained silent, as she always did during these moments. Speaking up had never earned her anything but condescending explanations about staying within her expertise. Boundaries. But her trained eye was already analyzing the mission parameters, identifying potential failure points that the pilot's tactical focus couldn't see. Mountain operations meant extreme temperature fluctuations that could cause hydraulic seals to fail. High-altitude flying stressed transmission systems beyond normal operational limits. Extended combat missions pushed engines into heat ranges that degraded critical components rapidly. After the briefing, Chief Warrant Officer Jenkins approached Sofia with the casual manner of someone delivering routine instructions. "Chun, I need you to prep all 6 birds for deployment. Standard pre-flight maintenance, nothing fancy. These guys want to be airborne in 36 hours. Sofia nodded respectfully, though her mind was already racing through the comprehensive inspection routine she'd developed over years of keeping helicopters operational in challenging conditions. "Chief, given the mountain environment and extended mission duration, I'd recommend enhanced inspections on the transmission cooling systems and hydraulic pressure regulators. Those components are particularly vulnerable to the kind of stress they'll be facing." Jenkins waved dismissively, his attention already shifting to other priorities. "Just stick to the technical manuals, Chun. These pilots know their aircraft, and Command has confidence in the mission planning." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Your job is maintenance, not tactical analysis. The conversation ended with familiar finality, leaving Sofia to return to her work with the quiet determination that had defined her entire military career. She'd learned long ago that expertise, unaccompanied by rank, carried little weight in military decision-making processes. Her knowledge of helicopter systems exceeded that of most pilots, but institutional hierarchy placed her opinions far below those of officers who'd never spent time elbow-deep in transmission housings or hydraulic systems. Working alone in the vast hangar, Sofia began her meticulous inspection of Apache tail number 847, the lead aircraft for the deployment. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency across every accessible component, checking connections, testing pressures, examining wear patterns that revealed the aircraft's history of stress and repair. This particular helicopter had accumulated over 2,000 flight hours, much of it in combat environments that pushed every system to its operational limits. As she worked, Sofia's mind wandered to her childhood in her grandmother's garage. In San Antonio, where she'd first learned that mechanical systems had personalities as distinct as human beings. Her grandmother, Elena Chun, had been one of the few female mechanics in the city, specializing in vintage motorcycles that required intuitive understanding rather than computerized diagnostics. Elena had taught Sofia that machines communicated through vibrations, sounds, and thermal patterns that sensitive hands could interpret like reading Braille. Those early lessons had shaped Sofia's approach to helicopter maintenance, developing skills that complemented her formal technical training with experiential knowledge that couldn't be taught in classrooms. She could diagnose transmission problems by feeling subtle changes in rotor vibration patterns. Engine timing issues revealed themselves through barely perceptible variations in startup sequences. Hydraulic system degradation announced itself through pressure fluctuations that standard gauges might miss for weeks. Apache 847's transmission housing showed microscopic stress fractures around the mounting bolts, evidence of repeated high-stress operations that hadn't yet progressed to critical failure but suggested potential problems under extreme conditions. Sofia documented the issue in her maintenance log, recommending enhanced monitoring during deployment operations. Similar inspections of the remaining 5 aircraft revealed a pattern of wear consistent with aging systems being pushed toward their operational limits. Her detailed maintenance reports reflected hours of careful analysis, documenting component conditions with precision that far exceeded standard requirements. Each aircraft received recommendations for enhanced monitoring, preventive maintenance, and operational limitations that could prevent mechanical failures during critical missions. Sofia understood that these helicopters would be operating far from maintenance facilities, where even minor mechanical problems could become catastrophic emergencies. Captain Rodriguez found her working late that evening, surrounded by technical manuals and maintenance logs that covered every aspect of the squadron's mechanical readiness. His expression carried the casual condescension she'd grown accustomed to over the years, though tonight it seemed tinged with curiosity about her dedication to what he obviously considered routine work. "Still here, Chun? These birds are solid, you. Don't need to baby them like they're antiques. We've flown worse aircraft in tougher conditions without breaking a sweat." Sofia looked up from her diagnostic equipment, choosing her words carefully to avoid triggering the defensive responses that her observations sometimes provoked. "Sir, these aircraft are performing well within normal parameters. I'm just documenting some component wear patterns that might be relevant during extended mountain operations." Rodriguez picked up one of her maintenance reports, scanning the detailed technical analysis with obvious skepticism. This level of detail seems excessive for a routine deployment. Command expects these helicopters to perform their missions without constant mechanical handholding. That's why they're called Apache attack helicopters instead of garage queens. The pilot's laughter echoed through the empty hangar, but Sofia detected an undertone of nervousness that suggested his confidence might be more performative than genuine. She'd observed this pattern before pilots who used dismissive humor to mask their own anxieties about operating complex mechanical systems in hostile environments. Their flight training focused on tactical operations and emergency procedures, but rarely addressed the intimate mechanical knowledge that could prevent emergencies from occurring. "I understand, sir. My recommendations are simply based on component histories and environmental stress factors. These systems have been reliable, but mountain operations present unique challenges that might benefit from enhanced monitoring." Rodriguez set down the report with the casual gesture of someone dismissing irrelevant information. "Chun, I appreciate your thoroughness, but pilots have been flying helicopters in mountains for decades. We know how to handle our aircraft. And these Apaches are built to handle whatever we throw at them. Focus on basic maintenance and let us worry about the operational requirements." After Rodriguez left, Sofia continued working through the night, driven by knowledge that couldn't be easily explained to people who'd never experienced the intuitive connection between mechanic and machine. Her grandmother had called it mechanical empathy, the ability to sense what aircraft needed before standard diagnostics could identify problems. This skill had kept helicopters operational through countless missions, preventing failures that would have grounded other aircraft or endangered their crews. The deployment countdown continued with military precision, each day bringing new preparations and final briefings that reinforced Sofia's invisibility within the operational hierarchy. She attended every session, absorbing tactical information that informed her mechanical analysis, but her presence was acknowledged only when specific maintenance questions arose. The pilots discussed their mission with confident enthusiasm, their conversations revealing both professional competence and complete faith in their equipment's reliability. Sofia's final pre-deployment report contained detailed recommendations for each aircraft, including specific monitoring procedures for high-stress operations and contingency plans for mechanical failures in remote locations. Her analysis predicted potential failure points with accuracy born from years of experience, but she knew these predictions would be dismissed as excessive caution by people who viewed mechanical systems as simple tools rather than complex entities requiring constant attention. The night before deployment, she stood alone in the hangar surrounded by 6 Apache helicopters that represented millions of dollars in military technology and More importantly, the lives of 12 pilots whose safety depended on mechanical reliability. Each aircraft had been inspected, tested, and certified according to military standards that she'd exceeded through personal dedication to excellence. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her warnings about potential problems were being ignored by people whose lives might depend on heeding them. Major Harrison's final briefing emphasized the mission's importance and the squadron's readiness for combat operations. His confidence was infectious, spreading through the assembled pilots like shared determination to succeed in challenging conditions. Sofia listened from her usual position at the back of the room, noting how tactical discussions focused on enemy threats and operational objectives while treating mechanical reliability as a given rather than a variable requiring constant attention. "Remember, gentlemen," Harrison concluded, "we're representing the finest attack helicopter squadron in the Army. These Apaches have been maintained to the highest standards by our ground crew, and they'll perform flawlessly in support of our mission objectives. Trust your training, trust your aircraft, and trust each other." The pilots responded with enthusiastic agreement, their voices reflecting the esprit de corps that made them effective in combat situations. Sofia remained silent, knowing that her mechanical knowledge could enhance their tactical effectiveness, but uncertain how to communicate complex technical concerns to people who viewed such issues as outside their responsibility. Her expertise remained invisible, overlooked by institutional structures that valued rank over experience, protocol over innovation. As the briefing concluded and pilots dispersed to their final preparations, Sofia returned to the hangar for one last inspection of her mechanical charges. Each Apache helicopter represented not just a military asset, but a complex system whose reliability depended on understanding gained through years of intimate contact with similar machines. She devoted her career to developing this understanding, accumulating knowledge that could prevent disasters, but only if someone valued her insights enough to listen. The hangar fell quiet as evening approached, filled only with the ambient sounds of a military base preparing for deployment. Sofia moved methodically through her final checks, her hands confirming what her instruments had already verified. These aircraft were mechanically sound and ready for their mission. Yet her experience whispered warnings about stress factors and environmental challenges that standard procedures couldn't anticipate. She'd done everything possible within her authority to ensure mission success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her most important contributions remained unrecognized and undervalued. Tomorrow would bring the deployment and the first real test of whether her mechanical preparations could support tactical operations in one of the world's most challenging environments. The Hindu Kush Mountains had claimed aircraft and lives from mechanical failures that might have been prevented by recognizing warning signs that only experienced mechanics could interpret. Sofia had seen those signs and documented her concerns, but institutional inertia and hierarchical dismissal had relegated her expertise to the background, where invisible people did invisible work that kept visible people alive. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders as she completed her final inspection routine. 12 pilots would trust their lives to mechanical systems that she understood better than anyone else in the squadron, yet her voice carried no authority in decisions that could determine mission success or failure. She'd spent years developing expertise that could enhance operational effectiveness, but that knowledge remained locked behind barriers of rank and protocol that valued credentials over competence, position over performance. As darkness fell over Fort Bliss, Sofia secured the hangar and prepared for what promised to be the most challenging deployment of her career. The Apache helicopters sat ready for combat, their mechanical hearts beating steadily under her careful attention. Whether that attention had been sufficient to prevent the disasters her experience predicted would be determined in mountains where mechanical failure meant certain death, and there would be no opportunity for second chances or belated recognition of overlooked expertise. The transport aircraft touched down at Bagram Airfield with the kind of controlled violence that characterized military operations in hostile territory. Sofia felt her stomach lurch as the C-17's wheels slammed against Afghan tarmac, the impact reverberating through the cargo bay where 6 Apache helicopters sat secured, like sleeping predators waiting to be unleashed. Through the aircraft's small windows, she could see the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush Mountains rising like ancient teeth against a sky so blue it seemed artificial. The transition from Texas heat to Afghan altitude hit her immediately as the cargo ramp lowered, thin air rushing into her lungs with the intensity of breathing through a straw. At 8,000 feet above sea level, Bagram operated in atmospheric conditions that stressed every mechanical system beyond normal parameters. Sofia had studied the environmental data extensively during their flight, calculating how reduced air density would affect engine performance, how temperature variations between scorching days and freezing nights would challenge hydraulic systems, how dust infiltration could degrade sensitive components within hours of arrival. Major Harrison emerged from the passenger compartment with characteristic confidence, his boots striking the tarmac with the authority of someone accustomed to taking charge in unfamiliar territory. Behind him, the squadron's pilots gathered, their gear with practiced efficiency, their conversations already shifting from travel complaints to operational planning. Sofia noticed how their demeanor had transformed during the flight, casual confidence hardening into focused determination as they prepared to operate in an environment where mistakes had permanent consequences. The base briefing room reeked of stale coffee and accumulated stress, its walls covered with tactical maps marking enemy positions, friendly force locations, and the countless geographical features that could either provide tactical advantage or become death traps for unwary aviators. Colonel Martinez, the forward operating base commander, possessed the weathered appearance of someone who'd spent too many years in places where survival depended on constant vigilance and perfect judgment. "Gentlemen," Martinez began, his voice carrying the gravitas of recent combat experience, "you're deploying into the most challenging operational environment our aviation units have encountered. The terrain is unforgiving, weather patterns change without warning, and enemy forces have demonstrated sophisticated anti-aircraft capabilities. Your mission's success depends on flawless execution and absolute mechanical reliability." Sofia absorbed every detail from her position near the back of the room, noting how operational discussions focused exclusively on tactical challenges, while treating mechanical reliability as an assumption rather than a variable requiring constant attention. The pilots asked intelligent questions about enemy capabilities, weather patterns, and communication protocols, but nobody inquired about maintenance support, spare parts availability, or the mechanical stress factors that could transform routine operations into catastrophic emergencies. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, the air operations officer, spread terrain maps across the briefing table with movements that suggested intimate familiarity with the geographical challenges they'd be facing. "Your primary area of operations covers approximately 200 square kilometers of mountainous terrain with elevations ranging from 8,000 to 14,000 feet. Weather conditions include severe turbulence, sudden temperature changes, and wind patterns that can shift direction and intensity within minutes." Captain Rodriguez studied the topographical features with obvious appreciation for the tactical complexity they represented, his expression reflecting the kind of professional excitement that characterized experienced combat pilots facing challenging missions. "Sir, what's our maintenance posture once we begin operations? These mountain conditions can be brutal on aircraft systems." Martinez gestured toward Sofia with the casual dismissiveness she'd grown accustomed to throughout her career. "Your maintenance support consists of Sergeant Chun and whatever local assistance we can provide. This is intended as a short-duration, high-intensity operation with minimal logistical footprint. Your aircraft have been certified mission-ready, and we expect them to perform accordingly." The assumption underlying Martinez's statement reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of how mechanical systems responded to extreme operational stress. Sofia had documented numerous component vulnerabilities that could manifest under the precise conditions they'd be encountering. But her detailed maintenance reports had been filed away as excessive documentation rather than critical operational intelligence. The institutional tendency to treat mechanical reliability as a given rather than an achievement requiring constant effort had created dangerous gaps between tactical planning and mechanical reality. Lieutenant Thompson raised concerns about emergency landing options in terrain that offered few safe alternatives to catastrophic crashes. "Sir, if we experience mechanical emergencies, what are our recovery options? This terrain doesn't exactly offer convenient landing zones for disabled aircraft." Brooks pointed to several marked locations on the operational maps, each representing forward operating bases or emergency landing sites scattered throughout the mountains like tiny islands of safety in an ocean of hostile territory. Emergency sites are limited and defended by small security detachments. Any aircraft experiencing mechanical problems will need to reach one of these locations or face potential capture or destruction. The briefing continued with detailed discussions of communication procedures, rules of engagement, and coordination protocols with ground forces operating in the target area. Sofia listened intently, building a mental picture of operational requirements that would stress aircraft systems in ways that standard testing couldn't replicate. Extended high-altitude flight operations would push engines beyond normal performance envelopes. Rapid altitude changes would challenge hydraulic systems designed for more gradual pressure variations. Combat maneuvering would subject airframes to stress loads that accumulated damage over time. Her maintenance experience had taught her that aircraft failures rarely occurred randomly. They developed through accumulated stress that manifested as subtle changes in performance characteristics, unusual vibrations, or irregular system responses that trained senses could detect long before standard diagnostic equipment registered problems. The key was recognizing these early warning signs and taking preventive action before minor issues escalated into catastrophic failures. After the briefing, Sofia set up her maintenance station in a corner of the aircraft parking area, surrounded by tool containers and diagnostic equipment that represented her entire capability for keeping 6 Apache helicopters operational in one of the world's most challenging environments. The contrast between her minimal resources and the complex mechanical systems she'd be supporting struck her as emblematic of military assumptions about maintenance requirements in forward deployed operations. Chief Warrant Officer Jenkins found her organizing spare parts inventory, his expression reflecting the stress of transitioning from familiar base operations to the uncertainties of combat deployment. "Chun, I need these birds ready for combat. Operations within 12 hours. First mission launches tomorrow at dawn, and there's no room for mechanical delays." Sofia nodded while mentally reviewing the comprehensive inspection routine she'd need to complete before certifying any aircraft for combat operations. "Chief, I'll need to conduct post-transport inspections on all aircraft, checking for any damage or system degradation from the deployment flight. Given the altitude and environmental conditions here, I also recommend enhanced monitoring of engine performance and hydraulic system pressures." Jenkins checked his watch with the impatience of someone facing multiple competing priorities. "Just get them airworthy, Chun. These pilots know their aircraft, and command expects immediate operational capability. We don't have time for elaborate inspection procedures." The dismissal was familiar, but Sofia couldn't ignore the mechanical realities that institutional pressure couldn't change. Transport operations subjected aircraft to stress patterns different from normal flight operations, and the altitude change from sea level to 8,000 feet required system adjustments. that standard procedures might not address adequately. Her experience had taught her that thorough post-transport inspections often revealed problems that could ground aircraft if discovered during critical missions. Working through the afternoon, Sofia conducted her inspections with methodical precision, her hands seeking the subtle signs of stress or degradation that could predict future failures. Apache 847 showed evidence of minor hydraulic pressure fluctuations during the transport flight. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger warning systems, but sufficient to warrant enhanced monitoring during operational flights. Similar inspections of the remaining aircraft revealed the kind of minor issues that experienced mechanics learned to identify and address before they escalated into mission-critical problems. Her detailed maintenance logs documented these findings with precision that exceeded standard requirements, creating a record of aircraft condition that could inform operational planning if anyone bothered to review her recommendations. But Sofia had learned that maintenance documentation was often treated as bureaucratic necessity rather than operational intelligence, filed away unread by people who assumed mechanical reliability without understanding the effort required to achieve it. The first mission briefing took place before dawn, with pilots gathering in the dim light of temporary facilities that emphasized the austere nature of their forward deployment. Major Harrison outlined their objectives with characteristic confidence, describing close air support operations for Special Forces teams, conducting high-value target elimination in terrain that offered enemies numerous advantages over conventional military tactics. Sofia attended the briefing despite having no formal role in tactical planning, absorbing operational details that informed her understanding of how aircraft systems would be stressed during actual combat operations. The mission profile included extended high-altitude flight, rapid altitude changes for tactical concealment, and potential combat maneuvering that could push aircraft beyond normal operational parameters. Each element represented specific challenges for mechanical systems that her experience could anticipate and potentially mitigate. Weather conditions looked challenging, Harrison announced, studying meteorological reports that predicted severe turbulence, unpredictable wind patterns, and temperature variations that could affect aircraft performance in ways that combat pilots might not immediately recognize. We'll be operating at the edge of our performance envelope, so maintain constant awareness of aircraft status and report any unusual indications immediately. Captain Rodriguez examined the flight planning charts with obvious concern about the operational challenges they represented. Sir, these altitude profiles show some pretty dramatic elevation changes. Are we confident about engine performance? At these altitudes, especially if we need emergency power for combat maneuvering. Harrison's response reflected institutional confidence in equipment, reliability that Sofia knew was based more on optimism than understanding. These Apaches are designed for high-altitude operations, and our maintenance team has certified them for this mission profile. Trust your aircraft and your training. Sofia wanted to speak up, to explain how high-altitude operations stressed engine cooling systems in ways that could lead to overheating during extended flight operations. But her position in the military hierarchy provided no platform for such technical input. Her expertise remained invisible, relegated to post-mission maintenance rather than pre-mission planning that could prevent problems before they endangered lives. The helicopters launched into pre-dawn darkness with rotor noise that shattered the mountain silence like thunder rolling through stone canyons. Sofia watched from the flight line as navigation lights disappeared into the black sky, carrying 12 pilots toward an operational environment that would test every system she'd spent weeks preparing. Her maintenance preparations had been thorough, but she couldn't shake the feeling that institutional dismissal of her technical concerns had created vulnerabilities that combat operations would soon expose. Radio communications crackled with operational updates as the squadron transitioned to their assigned patrol area, pilot voices carrying the focused professionalism that characterized experienced aviators conducting dangerous missions. Sofia monitored maintenance frequencies while tracking flight operations through radio traffic that provided glimpses into the challenging conditions her aircraft were encountering. The first indication of trouble came through subtle changes in engine telemetry that her diagnostic equipment registered as variations within normal parameters, but which her experience recognized as early warning signs of developing problems. Apache 847's engine temperature readings showed microscopic fluctuations that suggested cooling system stress, while transmission vibration patterns indicated bearing wear acceleration under high-altitude operational conditions. Sofia documented these observations in her maintenance log while preparing diagnostic equipment for post-mission inspections that would either confirm or refute her concerns. Her experience had taught her that mechanical problems rarely announced themselves dramatically. They developed gradually through accumulated stress that manifested as subtle performance changes that trained senses could detect long before catastrophic failures occurred. 2 hours into the mission, Lieutenant Thompson's voice crackled through radio communications with tension that suggested something beyond routine operational challenges. "Lead, this is Apache 2. I'm showing unusual vibrations in the main transmission system. Readings are still within normal parameters, but something doesn't feel right." Major Harrison's response reflected standard operational procedure for addressing pilot concerns about aircraft performance. Apache 2 conduct standard diagnostic checks and report results. If all systems show normal operation, continue mission. Sofia grabbed her headset and keyed the maintenance frequency, her voice carrying urgency that she hoped would penetrate institutional resistance to technical input from non-pilots. "Apache 2, this is maintenance. Can you describe the vibration characteristics? Frequency, intensity, any correlation with power settings or flight attitudes?" Thompson's reply revealed the kind of detailed observation that Sofia had hoped to hear from pilots who'd been trained to recognize unusual aircraft behavior. Maintenance, the vibration seemed to correlate with collective input, particularly during high-power settings. It's subtle, but definitely different from normal transmission characteristics. Sofia's experience immediately identified the symptoms as consistent with transmission bearing degradation under high-stress operational conditions, precisely the kind of problem she'd predicted could develop during extended mountain operations. Her maintenance reports had documented component wear patterns that made such failures predictable, but those predictions had been dismissed as excessive caution rather than valuable intelligence. Apache 2 recommend reducing power settings to minimum mission requirements and monitoring transmission temperatures closely. Those symptoms suggest bearing stress that could escalate rapidly under continued high-power operations. Harrison's voice cut through the maintenance frequency with authority that brooked no discussion. "Maintenance, limit communications to essential traffic only. Apache 2, continue diagnostic procedures and report any actual system malfunctions." The radio fell silent except for routine operational communications, but Sofia knew that institutional protocol had just prevented her from providing technical guidance that could prevent a catastrophic mechanical failure. Her expertise had been dismissed in favor of standard procedures that assumed mechanical problems would announce themselves through warning systems, rather than subtle changes that required experiential knowledge to interpret. 30 minutes later, the mountain morning erupted with emergency radio traffic that confirmed Sofia's worst fears about ignored warning signs escalating into life-threatening emergencies. Apache 847's transmission had failed catastrophically during a high-power climb, leaving Major Harrison and his co-pilot attempting to control a helicopter that had suddenly become a falling stone with rotating blades. "Mayday, mayday, this is Apache lead." Harrison's voice carried the controlled panic of someone facing imminent death while maintaining professional composure. "Complete transmission failure. attempting emergency landing in hostile territory. All aircraft provide immediate support and coordinate rescue operations. Sofia ran toward the Flight Operations Center, her mind racing through emergency procedures while her heart pounded with the knowledge that her predicted failure had just endangered the squadron commander's life. The mechanical disaster she'd tried to prevent through enhanced monitoring and preventive maintenance had occurred exactly as her experience had suggested, but institutional dismissal of her expertise had prevented the interventions that might have saved lives. The operations center buzzed with frantic activity as controllers attempted to coordinate rescue operations for a downed helicopter in terrain that offered enemies every advantage over potential rescue forces. Emergency frequencies crackled with position reports, casualty assessments, and desperate requests for close air support from aircraft that were suddenly one helicopter short of their planned strength. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos with professional competence that reflected his experience in crisis situations. Operations, this is Apache 2. I have visual contact with the crash site. Both crew members appear to be alive but injured. Enemy forces are moving toward their position from multiple directions. Sofia grabbed the radio microphone with desperation born from knowledge that she could have prevented this disaster if anyone had listened to her technical concerns. Apache 2, this is maintenance. Be advised your aircraft is showing early indicators of the same transmission problems that caused Apache lead's failure. Recommend immediate return to base for emergency inspection. Rodriguez's response revealed the dangerous tendency of pilots to trust their instruments over mechanical expertise that could save their lives. Maintenance, all my systems are showing normal operation. I'm not abandoning the rescue mission based on your speculation. The refusal to acknowledge her expertise in the face of clear evidence that her predictions had been accurate reflected institutional resistance to technical input that could prevent additional disasters. Sofia had spent years developing knowledge that could keep pilots alive, but hierarchical assumptions about expertise validity continued to place rank above experience, even when lives hung in the balance. Apache 847's emergency landing had occurred in a narrow valley surrounded by enemy positions, creating a tactical nightmare that required immediate rescue operations before hostile forces could capture or kill the downed aircrew. The remaining 5 Apache helicopters faced the challenge of providing close air support while maintaining operational capability, despite mechanical vulnerabilities that Sofia could predict but apparently couldn't prevent. Lieutenant Thompson's aircraft began showing the same transmission vibration patterns that had preceded Apache 847's catastrophic failure, but radio communications revealed that pilots were interpreting these symptoms as normal operational variations rather than emergency warning signs. Sofia's attempts to provide technical guidance continued to be dismissed as non-essential communications that interfered with tactical operations. The rescue mission developed into a running battle as enemy forces closed on the crash site while Apache helicopters provided covering fire from positions that maximized their mechanical stress through rapid maneuvering and high-power operations. Each tactical requirement pushed aircraft systems closer to failure thresholds that Sofia could calculate but couldn't communicate effectively to pilots, who viewed mechanical considerations as secondary to mission accomplishment. Sofia watched helplessly as her carefully maintained aircraft were stressed beyond their design limits by operational requirements that treated mechanical reliability as infinite rather than carefully managed resource requiring constant attention. Her expertise remained invisible while visible disasters unfolded, exactly as her experience had predicted they would if technical warnings continued to be ignored in favor of institutional assumptions about equipment invincibility. The mountain battlefield had become a test of whether expertise could overcome institutional resistance to recognizing knowledge that existed outside traditional authority structures. Sofia possessed information that could save lives and prevent additional aircraft losses. But her position in the military hierarchy provided no platform for communicating technical intelligence that challenged standard operating procedures and command assumptions about mechanical reliability. As emergency operations continued throughout the morning, Sofia prepared for the moment when institutional resistance to her expertise would finally crumble under the weight of mechanical reality that couldn't be dismissed, ignored, or explained away through rank and protocol. The invisible expert was about to become essential, but only after preventable disasters had already claimed aircraft and endangered lives that her knowledge could have protected. The moment Sofia had dreaded finally arrived when Lieutenant Thompson's voice crackled through the radio with barely controlled terror, his professional composure cracking under the reality of mechanical failure at 14,000 feet above hostile territory. The transmission bearing that Sofia had warned about through subtle vibration analysis had finally reached catastrophic failure point, and now 2 Apache helicopters were fighting for survival in mountains that offered no mercy to disabled aircraft. All stations, this is Apache 2 declaring emergency. Thompson's transmission cut through tactical communications like a blade through silk. Main transmission failure, attempting controlled descent, requesting immediate assistance for emergency landing procedures. Sofia felt her stomach drop as the nightmare scenario she'd predicted unfolded exactly as her mechanical analysis had suggested it would. 2 aircraft down in enemy territory within 3 hours of mission commencement. Both failures occurring in transmission systems that her maintenance reports had specifically identified as vulnerable to high-stress mountain operations. The invisible expert had become a prophet of disasters that institutional dismissal had transformed from preventable maintenance issues into life-threatening emergencies. Major Harrison's voice emerged from rescue operations at the first crash site, his transmission punctuated by the sound of small arms fire as enemy forces closed on his position. Apache 2, this is lead on ground. Attempt emergency landing. At grid reference 425 to 789, rocky terrain but defensible position. All other aircraft provide immediate close air support. The tactical situation had deteriorated into every commander's nightmare, with multiple aircraft emergencies occurring simultaneously in terrain that maximized enemy advantages while minimizing friendly force capabilities. Sofia grabbed her maintenance radio and keyed the emergency frequency, her voice carrying desperate urgency that reflected knowledge of additional disasters waiting to unfold if her warnings continued to be ignored. Apache flight, this is maintenance. Emergency override. All remaining aircraft show transmission-bearing stress patterns identical to failed units. Recommend immediate power reduction and emergency inspection procedures before additional catastrophic failures occur. Captain Rodriguez's response reflected the dangerous pilot tendency to trust instruments over mechanical expertise, even when evidence of that expertise's accuracy surrounded them in the form of crashed helicopters and emergency situations. Maintenance. My aircraft is performing normally. All systems green. No unusual indications. I'm not reducing combat capability based on your theories. Sofia's frustration boiled over into open defiance of military protocol that had prevented her expertise from saving lives and preventing disasters. Captain Rodriguez, those aren't theories. Those are mechanical facts based on component analysis. That predicted both transmission failures. Your aircraft will fail within the next 30 minutes unless you reduce power settings immediately. The radio frequency erupted with overlapping transmissions as rescue operations, tactical communications, and mechanical warnings created chaos that reflected the squadron's deteriorating situation. 3 aircraft remained operational, but Sofia's diagnostic equipment showed bearing stress patterns, indicating that all 3 helicopters were approaching failure thresholds that would leave the entire squadron stranded in hostile territory with no means of extraction or support. Colonel Martinez's voice cut through the confusion with command authority that demanded immediate attention from all personnel involved in the developing emergency. All Apache units return to base immediately for emergency inspection and mechanical evaluation. Ground forces will establish defensive perimeter around downed aircraft pending rescue operations. Rodriguez's response revealed the institutional tension between tactical mission requirements and mechanical reality that Sofia had wrestled with throughout her maintenance career. "Sir, we can't abandon rescue operations. Our people are on the ground in enemy territory and we're their only immediate support. These aircraft are performing adequately for continued operations." Sofia keyed her radio with desperation born from watching preventable disasters unfold while possessing knowledge that could prevent additional casualties if anyone would listen to mechanical expertise rather than dismissing it as irrelevant. Technical minutia. Colonel Martinez, this is Sergeant Chen. All remaining aircraft are approaching transmission failure thresholds. Continued high-power operations will result in additional catastrophic mechanical failures within minutes. The radio fell silent for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity before Martinez's voice returned with the gravity of someone making decisions that would determine whether personnel lived or died in one of the world's most unforgiving environments. "Sergeant Chen, you're not qualified to make tactical decisions about mission continuation. Return to your maintenance duties and prepare for aircraft recovery operations." Sofia stared at her diagnostic equipment, showing transmission-bearing temperatures climbing toward critical failure points on all three remaining helicopters, knowing that institutional resistance to her expertise was about to cost additional lives and aircraft that proper mechanical management could preserve. Her years of experience had taught her to recognize the precise moment when mechanical systems transitioned from stressed but functional to catastrophically failed, and that moment was approaching rapidly for aircraft whose crews remained unaware of their impending disasters. The decision that would define the rest of her military career crystallized in Sofia's mind as she watched bearing temperature readings approach redline values that guaranteed transmission failures within minutes rather than hours. Institutional protocol prohibited her from taking direct action to prevent disasters that her expertise could clearly predict. But watching pilots die from mechanical failures, she could prevent violated every principle that had motivated her. Dedication to keeping aircraft operational and crews alive. Without seeking permission or following established procedures, Sofia grabbed her toolkit and ran toward the aircraft parking area where Apache 355 sat idling with Captain Rodriguez, conducting pre-flight checks for continued combat operations. Her unauthorized approach to an operational aircraft represented a violation of military protocol that could result in court-martial proceedings. But Sofia's knowledge of impending mechanical failure outweighed her concern for personal consequences. "Captain Rodriguez, shut down your aircraft immediately," Sofia called out as she approached the helicopter, her voice carrying authority born from absolute certainty about mechanical realities that institutional hierarchy couldn't change. "Your transmission is entering critical failure mode, and continued operation will result in catastrophic breakdown." Rodriguez looked up from his instrument panel with obvious irritation at being interrupted during mission-critical preparations by someone whose expertise he'd consistently dismissed as irrelevant technical overcaution. "Sergeant Chun, step away from this aircraft immediately. I'm conducting authorized operations under direct orders, and your interference is unacceptable." Sofia ignored the command and continued her approach to the helicopter, her trained eye already identifying the subtle signs of mechanical stress that her diagnostic equipment had detected from a distance. The main transmission housing showed thermal stress patterns visible to experienced mechanics who knew what to look for, while engine parameters displayed the kind of minor irregularities that preceded major failures in aircraft operating beyond their design limits. "Sir, I can show you exactly what I'm talking about," Sofia said, gesturing towards specific components that her analysis had identified as critical failure points. The transmission bearing temperatures are exceeding safe. Operational limits and the vibration patterns indicate imminent mechanical breakdown. This isn't speculation, it's mechanical reality. Rodriguez's expression shifted from irritation to uncertain concern as Sofia's detailed technical explanation began penetrating his institutional resistance to accepting expertise from someone outside the pilot community. My instruments show all systems operating within normal parameters. How can you detect problems that my sophisticated diagnostic systems can't identify? Sofia climbed onto the aircraft's maintenance platform with movements that reflected years of intimate familiarity with Apache helicopter systems, her hands moving directly to access panels that provided visual confirmation of the problems her remote diagnostics had detected. Because instruments measure what they're designed to measure. But they don't measure everything that matters. Experience teaches you to recognize patterns that instruments miss. Her inspection revealed exactly what her analysis had predicted. Transmission housing showing thermal stress fractures. Hydraulic fluid exhibiting contamination patterns consistent with bearing degradation. And component wear signatures that indicated imminent catastrophic failure under continued high-stress operations. The evidence was unmistakable to anyone with sufficient mechanical knowledge to interpret what they were seeing. Jesus Christ, Rodriguez whispered as Sofia pointed out specific indicators of mechanical stress that his flight training had never taught him to recognize. How long have you known about these problems? Sofia's answer carried the weight of frustration, accumulated over years of having her expertise dismissed by people whose lives depended on mechanical reliability they didn't understand. I've been documenting these developing problems for weeks, sir. My maintenance reports contain specific warnings about transmission vulnerabilities under high-stress mountain operations, but those warnings were dismissed as excessive technical caution. The sound of rotor blades overhead announced the approach of Apache 723, with Lieutenant Morrison conducting similar pre-flight preparations for continued rescue operations, despite mechanical conditions that Sofia knew would result in additional aircraft failures within minutes. Her diagnostic equipment showed bearing stress patterns on Morrison's helicopter that exactly matched the indicators that had preceded both previous transmission failures. Captain Rodriguez, I need you to trust my expertise and shut down your aircraft immediately, Sofia said with quiet authority that reflected absolute certainty about mechanical realities that couldn't be negotiated or ignored. Then help me convince Lieutenant Morrison to do the same before we lose all remaining aircraft to preventable mechanical failures. Rodriguez stared at the evidence of mechanical stress that Sofia had revealed, his pilot training warring with institutional assumptions about expertise validity that had shaped his entire military career. Sergeant Chun, if you're wrong about this, we're abandoning our people on the ground and violating direct orders from superior officers. If you're right, we're preventing additional disasters that could cost more lives. Sofia met his gaze with steady confidence born from decades of mechanical experience that had never failed to accurately predict aircraft behavior under stress conditions. Sir, I've never been wrong about mechanical failures, and I'm not wrong about this. These aircraft will fail catastrophically if we continue operations, without addressing transmission-bearing problems that are now clearly visible to anyone who knows what to look for. The moments stretched between them as Rodriguez processed the implications of trusting mechanical expertise over institutional protocol, his decision carrying consequences that could affect the lives of everyone involved in the developing emergency. Sofia watched his expression shift from uncertainty to determination as he finally accepted that her technical knowledge represented information that could save lives rather than interference with proper military procedures. Morrison, shut down your aircraft immediately, Rodriguez called across the tarmac, his voice carrying new authority derived from accepting rather than dismissing Sofia's expertise. We have critical mechanical issues that require immediate attention before continued flight operations. Lieutenant Morrison's response reflected the same institutional resistance to maintenance input that had characterized the squadron's approach to technical warnings throughout their deployment. Rodriguez, what are you talking about? My aircraft is performing perfectly, and we have people on the ground who need our support. I'm not grounding myself based on maintenance speculation. Sofia ran toward Morrison's helicopter with Rodriguez, following close behind, both of them driven by knowledge that mechanical reality couldn't be changed through pilot confidence or institutional assumptions about equipment reliability. Morrison's aircraft showed the same thermal stress patterns and component degradation indicators that had preceded both previous transmission failures, making additional catastrophic breakdown a matter of minutes rather than hours. Lieutenant Morrison, this is Captain Rodriguez. Rodriguez called out with command authority that reflected his acceptance of Sofia's expertise as operationally relevant rather than technically irrelevant. Shut down your aircraft immediately and submit to emergency mechanical inspection. That's a direct order based on critical safety information. Morrison's confusion was evident in his voice as he attempted to reconcile Rodriguez's unexpected order with his understanding of mission requirements and aircraft status. Sir, I don't understand. All my systems are operating normally, and we have emergency rescue operations to conduct. What critical safety information are you referring to? Sofia approached Morrison's aircraft with the same methodical precision she'd used to convince Rodriguez, her diagnostic equipment in hand and her expertise focused on demonstrating rather than explaining the mechanical problems that threatened to claim additional lives if ignored. Lieutenant Morrison, I need 60 seconds to show you exactly what Captain Rodriguez and I discovered about transmission bearing failures that your instruments can't detect. The inspection revealed identical problems to those Sofia had found. On Rodriguez's helicopter, transmission components operating beyond safe stress limits, bearing degradation patterns indicating imminent failure, and thermal signatures that experienced mechanics recognized as precursors to catastrophic breakdown. Morrison's expression shifted from skepticism to alarm as Sofia's evidence accumulated into undeniable proof of mechanical problems that his flight training had never prepared him to identify. How is this possible? Morrison asked, his voice reflecting the unsettling discovery that sophisticated aircraft systems could fail in ways that standard diagnostic procedures couldn't predict or prevent. These helicopters underwent complete pre-deployment inspections and were certified mission-ready by qualified maintenance personnel. Sofia's explanation carried the patience of someone who'd spent years trying to communicate complex technical concepts to people whose training focused on operational rather than mechanical aspects of aviation. Pre-deployment inspections test for current functionality, but they don't predict how components will respond to stress conditions that exceed normal operational parameters. Mountain operations push these systems beyond their design limits in ways that accelerate wear patterns and create failure modes that standard testing can't anticipate. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate transmissions from the crash sites, where Major Harrison and Lieutenant Thompson waited for rescue operations that had been delayed by mechanical emergencies that Sofia's expertise could have prevented. If her warnings had been heeded before deployment, rather than dismissed as excessive technical caution, enemy forces were closing on both positions, and the window for successful rescue operations was shrinking rapidly as tactical situations deteriorated. Maintenance, this is Apache lead on the ground. Harrison's voice carried the controlled desperation of someone facing capture or death while maintaining professional composure. Estimated time to enemy contact is 15 minutes. Require immediate close air support and extraction assets. Sofia keyed her radio with authority that she'd never exercised during her military career, her voice reflecting technical expertise that could no longer be dismissed or ignored in the face of mounting evidence that her mechanical knowledge represented critical operational intelligence. Apache lead, this is Sergeant Chun. We're implementing emergency procedures to restore aircraft operational capability. Maintain defensive positions for immediate extraction once mechanical issues are resolved. Rodriguez and Morrison stared at Sofia with expressions that reflected their growing recognition that the quiet mechanic they dismissed as technically overcautious possessed knowledge that could determine mission success or failure in ways that their tactical training had never prepared them to appreciate. Her expertise had suddenly become essential. Rather than irrelevant, visible rather than invisible, authoritative rather than advisory. Sergeant Chun, Rodriguez said with respect that acknowledged her technical authority for the first time since their deployment began. What do you need from us to get these aircraft operational for rescue operations? Sofia's mind raced through emergency repair procedures that could restore limited operational capability to aircraft suffering from advanced transmission-bearing degradation. Her years of experience providing solutions that standard maintenance manuals didn't address. I need 30 minutes to implement temporary bearing stabilization procedures that will provide sufficient operational capability for rescue missions. The repairs won't last long, but they'll get you to the crash sites and back, working with focused intensity that reflected years of emergency maintenance experience. Sofia began implementing field expedient repairs that utilized techniques her grandmother had taught her for keeping damaged motorcycles operational long enough to reach proper repair facilities. The procedures required intimate knowledge of helicopter transmission systems, combined with improvisational skills that couldn't be learned from technical manuals or formal training programs. Rodriguez and Morrison assisted with unprecedented cooperation, following Sofia's instructions with respect that acknowledged her technical expertise as operationally critical rather than mechanically irrelevant. Their assistance reflected a fundamental shift in understanding about the relationship between tactical operations and mechanical reliability, recognizing that mission success depended on technical knowledge that existed outside traditional pilot training and command authority. These bearing stabilization procedures will provide approximately 2 hours of operational capability, Sofia explained as she worked, her hands moving with practiced precision through repair sequences that she'd developed through years of keeping damaged aircraft operational under challenging conditions. That's sufficient time for rescue operations, but these aircraft will require complete transmission overhauls before any additional flight operations. The temporary repairs represented mechanical artistry that transformed severely degraded aircraft into operational assets through techniques that combine technical knowledge with experiential wisdom, accumulated over years of emergency maintenance in challenging environments. Sofia's expertise had finally found expression through direct action rather than dismissed recommendations, her mechanical knowledge becoming visible through successful problem-solving rather than theoretical predictions. As the repaired helicopters prepared for rescue operations, Sofia monitored their mechanical status with diagnostic equipment that confirmed her temporary repairs were providing the operational capability necessary for mission completion. The bearing stabilization procedures were holding. Transmission temperatures remained within acceptable limits, and all systems showed sufficient reliability for the limited operations required to extract personnel from both crash sites. Apache Flight, this is operations. Colonel Martinez's voice carried new respect for Sofia's technical expertise that recent events had demonstrated as operationally critical rather than mechanically irrelevant. Proceed with rescue operations under mechanical supervision of Sergeant Chun. All flight operations to be conducted within parameters specified by maintenance authority. The formal recognition of Sofia's technical authority represented institutional acknowledgement that expertise could exist outside traditional command structures, that mechanical knowledge possessed operational relevance equal to tactical training, and that mission success required integration of technical and Operational expertise rather than hierarchical dismissal of specialized knowledge that didn't conform to standard authority patterns. Rodriguez and Morrison launched their repaired aircraft toward the crash sites with confidence derived from understanding rather than dismissing the mechanical factors that determined operational capability. Sofia's expertise had transformed them from pilots who trusted their instruments above all else into aviators who recognized that successful operations required integration of technical knowledge with tactical skill, mechanical understanding with operational competence. The rescue operations proceeded with precision that reflected proper integration of technical and tactical expertise. Sofia's mechanical guidance ensuring that aircraft operated within capability limits that her temporary repairs could support, while pilots conducted extraction operations that demonstrated their tactical competence under challenging conditions. Both crash sites were successfully cleared, with all personnel recovered despite enemy pressure and mechanical limitations that proper expertise had overcome. Major Harrison's first words after rescue reflected his recognition that Sofia's dismissed expertise had ultimately saved lives that institutional resistance to her technical knowledge had endangered. Sergeant Chun, I owe you more than an apology. Your mechanical expertise prevented additional disasters and enabled successful rescue operations that wouldn't have been possible without your intervention. Lieutenant Thompson's gratitude carried similar acknowledgement that Sofia's predicted mechanical failures had proven accurate, while standard diagnostic procedures had failed to identify problems that nearly cost multiple lives. Sergeant, how did you know our transmissions would fail when all our instruments showed normal operation? Your predictions were absolutely accurate. Sofia's explanation reflected years of trying to communicate technical concepts that her experience had validated, but institutional hierarchy had dismissed as irrelevant over caution from someone whose expertise didn't conform to established authority patterns. Mechanical systems communicate through patterns that instruments don't always measure. Experience teaches you to recognize these communication signals and interpret their significance for predicting component behavior under stress conditions. The post-mission debriefing took place in an atmosphere transformed by recognition that Sofia's expertise represented critical operational capability rather than technical interference with proper military procedures. Colonel Martinez conducted the session with obvious respect for mechanical knowledge that recent events had demonstrated as essential for mission success rather than irrelevant for tactical operations. Sergeant Chun, Martinez began, his voice carrying institutional authority that acknowledged rather than dismissed her technical expertise. Your mechanical analysis prevented additional aircraft losses and enabled successful rescue operations. Despite initial institutional resistance to your technical recommendations, your expertise has proven operationally critical in ways that our standard procedures failed to recognize. Sofia felt the weight of institutional recognition that she'd never expected to receive during her military career. Acknowledgement that her technical knowledge possessed operational relevance equal to tactical training and command authority. Sir, my expertise has always been available. The difference today was having circumstances that forced institutional attention to technical recommendations rather than allowing them to be dismissed as irrelevant maintenance concerns. The recognition extended beyond simple acknowledgement of successful problem-solving to fundamental reconsideration of how military organizations should integrate technical expertise with operational planning. Sofia's accurate predictions of mechanical failures had demonstrated that specialized knowledge could provide operational intelligence that traditional authority structures might overlook or dismiss, despite its critical importance for mission success. Captain Rodriguez approached Sofia after the debriefing with expressions that reflected his personal transformation from someone who dismissed her expertise to someone who recognized its operational value. Sergeant Chun, I need to ask you something that's been bothering me since our conversation at the aircraft. How many other mechanical problems have you identified that we've ignored because we didn't understand their significance. Sofia's answer carried implications that extended far beyond their current deployment to fundamental questions about how military organizations recognized and utilized expertise that existed outside traditional authority structures. Captain, I've documented numerous component vulnerabilities and operational recommendations that have been filed as maintenance reports rather than treated as operational intelligence. Most mechanical failures are preventable if technical warnings are integrated into operational planning rather than dismissed as irrelevant over caution. The conversation continued with Rodriguez asking detailed questions about mechanical factors that affected operational capability, his curiosity reflecting genuine interest in understanding technical aspects of aviation that his flight training had never addressed. Sofia found herself in the unfamiliar position of being listened to rather than dismissed, her expertise valued rather than ignored, her technical knowledge recognized as operationally relevant rather than mechanically irrelevant. Lieutenant Morrison joined their discussion with similar interest in understanding mechanical factors that determined aircraft operational capability under challenging conditions. Sergeant Chun, could you teach us to recognize the early warning signs you use to predict transmission failures? Our flight training focused on responding to emergencies rather than preventing them through early detection of developing problems. Sofia's response reflected her willingness to share knowledge that could prevent future disasters if properly integrated into pilot training and operational procedures. Early detection requires understanding how mechanical systems communicate through subtle changes in performance characteristics that instruments might not register, but experienced observation can identify. It's pattern recognition that develops through extensive contact with aircraft under various stress conditions. The informal training session that developed around their conversation represented exactly the kind of integration between technical and operational expertise that Sofia had always believed could enhance mission effectiveness while preventing mechanical disasters. Pilots asking questions about mechanical factors, while mechanics explained technical concepts in operationally relevant terms, creating mutual understanding that transcended traditional authority hierarchies. Word of Sofia's mechanical expertise and successful prevention of additional aircraft losses spread throughout the forward operating base with velocity that surprised her given years of institutional invisibility. Personnel who'd never acknowledged her presence began approaching with technical questions, maintenance concerns, and requests for expertise that recent events had demonstrated as operationally critical rather than mechanically irrelevant. Colonel Martinez summoned Sofia to his office 3 days after the rescue operations for a conversation that would fundamentally change her military career trajectory. Sergeant Chun, I've been reviewing your maintenance reports from the past year, and I'm struck by the accuracy of your technical predictions and the operational relevance of recommendations that were apparently dismissed as excessive technical caution. Sofia listened with careful attention as Martinez outlined institutional changes that would formally recognize her expertise as operationally relevant rather than mechanically advisory. I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to warrant officer status with assignment as technical advisor for aviation maintenance operations. Your expertise needs institutional authority that matches its operational value. The promotion represented validation that Sofia had never expected during her military career. Formal recognition that technical expertise possessed operational relevance deserving institutional authority rather than hierarchical dismissal. Sir, I appreciate the recognition, but my primary concern has always been keeping aircraft operational and crews alive. Authority is useful only if it enables better integration of technical knowledge with operational planning. Martinez's response reflected institutional commitment to fundamental changes in how military organizations recognized and utilized expertise that existed outside traditional authority structures. Chief Warrant Officer Chun, your new position will include direct input into operational planning technical authority over maintenance decisions, and responsibility for training pilots to recognize mechanical factors that affect operational capability. The formal ceremony took place 1 week later with participation from personnel throughout the aviation brigade, their attendance reflecting recognition that Sofia's expertise had proven operationally critical in ways that institutional hierarchy had failed to appreciate. Major Harrison presented her warrant officer insignia with words that acknowledged both her technical competence and the institutional failures that had nearly prevented its recognition. Chief Warrant Officer Chun represents the kind of technical expertise that successful military operations require, but don't always recognize, Harrison announced. Her mechanical knowledge prevented disasters that could have cost multiple lives, and demonstrated the operational value of integrating technical expertise with tactical planning. Sofia's acceptance speech reflected her commitment to ensuring that other technical experts would receive recognition and institutional authority before emergencies forced acknowledgement of their operational relevance. Technical expertise exists throughout military organizations and personnel, whose knowledge could enhance operational effectiveness if properly recognized and integrated into planning processes. My experience demonstrates the importance of listening to specialized knowledge regardless of its source. The months following her promotion brought fundamental changes to aviation maintenance operations as Sofia implemented training programs that taught pilots to recognize mechanical factors affecting operational capability, while educating maintenance personnel about operational requirements that influence technical decisions. Her programs represented exactly the kind of integration between technical and operational expertise that she'd always believed could prevent disasters while enhancing mission effectiveness. Sofia's reputation extended beyond Fort Bliss, as word of her successful intervention spread throughout Army aviation communities, attracting attention from senior officers who recognized that her expertise represented solutions to mechanical problems that had plagued helicopter operations in challenging environments. Requests for consultation began arriving from units facing similar technical challenges in operational environments that stressed aircraft systems beyond normal design parameters. The training program she developed emphasized pattern recognition, skills that enabled early detection of developing mechanical problems, teaching personnel to identify subtle indicators that preceded catastrophic failures by sufficient time to implement preventive measures. Her courses represented formalization of knowledge that had previously existed only through individual experience, making critical expertise accessible to personnel who could use it to prevent disasters rather than merely respond to them. A year after the Afghanistan deployment, Sofia stood before a conference of senior aviation maintenance officers presenting lessons learned from her experience with institutional resistance to technical expertise. Her presentation emphasized the operational value of recognizing specialized knowledge, regardless of its source, and integrating technical expertise into planning processes, rather than treating it as irrelevant maintenance concern. Technical expertise represents operational intelligence that can prevent disasters and enhance mission effectiveness, Sofia explained to the assembled officers. The challenge lies in creating institutional structures that recognize and utilize specialized knowledge before emergencies force acknowledgement of its critical importance. Her recommendations for institutional reform included formal channels for technical input into operational planning, training programs that taught operational personnel to recognize mechanical factors affecting mission capability and authority, structures that empowered technical experts to implement preventive measures based on specialized knowledge, rather than waiting for catastrophic failures to validate their expertise. The conference concluded with unanimous support for implementing Sofia's recommendations throughout Army aviation units, recognition that her experience demonstrated institutional failures that could be prevented through proper integration of technical and operational expertise. Her expertise had finally achieved the institutional recognition that could prevent future disasters while enhancing operational effectiveness through proper utilization of specialized knowledge. Sofia's career had transformed from invisible mechanic whose expertise was dismissed as irrelevant over caution to recognized technical authority whose knowledge was valued as operationally critical. But more importantly, her experience had created institutional changes that would prevent other technical experts from experiencing the frustration of having life-saving knowledge dismissed until emergencies forced its recognition. The invisible expert had become visible not through self-promotion or political maneuvering, but through demonstrating competence when it mattered most and using that recognition to create institutional structures that valued expertise regardless of its source. Her legacy would continue through every pilot who learned to recognize mechanical warning signs, every maintenance technician whose recommendations received proper consideration, and every military operation that succeeded because technical expertise was integrated with tactical planning rather than dismissed as irrelevant concern. Years later, Sofia would reflect on the stormy night over Afghanistan when everything changed, recognizing that her transformation from dismissed mechanic to recognized expert had required not just demonstrating competence but also creating institutional structures that ensured other technical experts would receive recognition before emergencies forced acknowledgement of their critical importance. The invisible experts were invisible no more, and their expertise would continue preventing disasters through proper recognition and integration of specialized knowledge with operational requirements. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.